Chapter 9. Ashur hates himself. He sits at home in one of his lounges, feet kicked up on an ottoman, clothed in intricately woven blankets and shivering. It's getting colder outside, a taste of upcoming winter, and he's not looking forward to it at all. It only serves to make him feel more miserable than he already does. He doesn't even know why he had broken his word. He had told Darius the answer, and from that point on it was a slippery slope to helping him build the trellis, suggesting to use the willowbane as ropes to hold it together, weaving more willowbane through the gaps. He barely remembers when they had stopped, panting from effort, and Darius had invited him inside. "You helped me," he had said. "The least I could do is try to pay you back, right?" Every word grated on Ashur's nerves. Ashur takes one of the pillows surrounding him and presses it against his head, wrapping it around his face and ears. "You helped me." The tinge of gratitude, breaking through like the first few water droplets trickling from stone. "The least I could do is try to pay you back." The fear coursing through Darius, like salt leaching its way through the droplets. Right? And it all gets plugged up again. Ashur doesn't remember much after that. He just knew he had to get home, and all he's been doing at home is hiding, starved and parched. He already lied about not giving Darius any more help. What's one more lie? He could put Darius wherever and the human would be powerless to come back. He could put him back with the dinosaurs. He could put him far into the future in a timeline where aliens have enslaved humanity. He could put him in a world occupied by nothing but sentient bugs, or a world where humans above 5'7" are cold, or a world made of ice cream. By himself, he could just eat Darius and be done with it. He throws the pillow across the room, slapping it against the wall. Turning over, he feels hot tears burning the corners of his eyes. It wouldn't be in the spirit of the lying game. Yes, he went against his word, but he didn't know that he would. It wasn't an on-purpose lie. He hasn't lost. "Ashur?" Ashur's breath catches in his throat. The voice comes from outside, distant but distinct. It's Darius. Grumbling to himself, Ashur pushes himself up, wraps a few blankets around himself to substitute for clothes. Humans from Darius's timeline are sticklers about nudity, and heads out of the room. He heads to the nearest balcony and looks around, eventually catching sight of the human trying to peer beneath one of the roots, one of the caverns that's not an entryway. "I'll come meet you," he calls down to him, and Darius nearly jumps out of his skin. As he heads through the winding corridors of his tree, Ashur tries to think back to what he had said while leaving Darius. He'll curse himself if he had promised more help. His feet hit the cool soil, and the world's inner shifts and rumblings light up around his senses. He peeks out from one of the dark, damp basements at Darius. "What do you want?" He didn't really mean for it to come out so hostile, but it did. "I brought food," Darius says. Looking at him more closely, he's holding a pot with a lid. A food offering? Ashur's heart skips a beat. He pushes that feeling down. This is Darius, not anyone that he knew before. "Why?" Ashur asks. "Because you said I could?" Darius asks more than says. "A week ago?" Now Ashur remembers. Darius had wanted to invite him in for dinner, but Ashur had wanted to go home, so he gave the excuse that Darius is tired and needs all the food he can find for himself anyway. Darius had then asked if they could plan for something at a time when he could rest and gather more food, so they agreed on a week. That had been a problem for an Ashur somewhere down the timeline, and now this Ashur's arrived at that point. "Right," he says, grinning, though it feels more like baring his teeth. "Come in." He leads Darius inside, his back bristling. As they walk through the confines of Ashur's tree back toward the kitchen, Ashur pulls the blankets around himself tighter and tucks in the edges. He guesses he can pretend these are clothes. They don't look too different from his usual garments anyway. He hears Darius's heavy footsteps behind him, markedly unfamiliar. He can sense the adrenaline leaching into Darius's bloodstream, and it irks him. If Darius doesn't want to be here, he should just go. When they step into the kitchen, Ashur takes a moment to recover. "Where should I put this?" Darius asks, lifting the pot up. Ashur glances at it, making sure the handles are hollow. "You can hang it up over the fire right there," he says. tilting his head toward the hook over the fire with its 2 chains dangling down. He heads toward the cabinets to get some plates down. He hears Darius struggling to hook the chains on the pot's handles, but pointedly doesn't turn to help. Ow, Darius grunts. Chains are hot, Ashur says, focusing in on the sparking nerves in Darius's hands to make sure he's not too badly injured. Hey, what's in there anyway? Stew, Darius says. Ashur takes his hand off the edge of the stack of plates and grabs 2 bowls instead. What kind of stew? Whatever I could find, stew. After a few moments, Ashur shakes his head and nudges Darius aside from his task, gripping the chains to hang the pot himself. He grabs a ladle and dishes out a few servings. He can tell Darius didn't use anything to thicken the broth, so it's more like a soup, and just from the visuals, he can tell that Darius didn't sear whatever meat he used, and that he threw in vegetables of wildly varying cook times. But hey, he actually managed to make something edible, which Ashur wouldn't expect for a man of Darius's time and place. And he'll take anything, edible or non. They sit down and try the food, and Ashur can tell that Darius didn't taste it beforehand, because the human's fear only increases as he takes his first bite, undoubtedly due to the very real possibility of food poisoning. After a few bites, Ashur has to chew the tough meat a lot, which he appreciates on some level. Darius breaches the silence. What do you think? Ashur can't come up with a response before Darius continues. I mean, I know it's nothing like yours, but Darius's voice catches. But, you know, I'm not working with the best of ingredients, and I couldn't really find a lot. Ashur grits his teeth. It's fine, Darius, he says. It keeps the endless hunger abated, at least for now. That's saying something. Really? Darius clears his throat. Ashur finds the human's tempered excitement cute. The two eat, pausing only for strenuous conversation. Darius makes multiple attempts to kickstart something, talking about how the weather's been for the past week, how he's been surviving, how the trellis is working out. And Ashur's glad to hear that the willow bane's been filling it in and anchoring it, and it's not spreading over Darius's working space as fervently as before. But Ashur keeps getting distracted, not with anything in particular, but just zoning out and forgetting to reply. Being with the human is still insufferable, and his mind's eager to latch onto anything else at the moment. Ashur, Darius finally sighs. Do you mind if I, ask you something? Ashur swallows his bite. Sure, he says, the pit of his stomach sinking. That hunger of yours, he says. You really can never be full, huh? Ashur doesn't know why humans bother asking things that they already know. Yes, he says. My hunger can never be sated. Where did that come from? Darius asks. What happened to you? Ashur's tired. The blatant truth feels good to say right now. It came from my apotheosis, he explains. Well, it happened at the same time as my apotheosis. I don't know exactly what caused it. Maybe I was just hungry at the time, or maybe it comes from one of my domains. Apotheosis? Darius asks. Ashur blinks. This is gonna take a while. Apotheosis, he says. When I became a god. Darius tenses. Ashur can feel it in every muscle in the human's body, even the ones he can't consciously control. What? Darius says, letting the spoon slip from his fingers. You think you're a god, and you only decide to tell me this now? Ashur shrugs. I thought you knew. He can't help letting a few chuckles out. After having spent so long with Darius in his world, he thought the human would have realized much sooner. But judging by the absolute flood of stress hormones in Darius's blood, he certainly hadn't. No, is all Darius says, offense and shock in his tone. Ashur waits for him to continue. When he doesn't, Ashur speaks. What? He asks. Did you think I was just some wizard or something? Yes, Darius hisses. I thought you were human. Just a really powerful human. Ashur laughs. Darius continues. So, back on Earth, when I went to church. That wasn't me, Ashur finishes. That was a different god. One who very much likes to pretend he's the only one in existence. I suppose it makes him feel safe. Darius thinks. Ashur leans back in his chair, enjoying the way Darius's brow furrows and his lips purse as he pieces everything together. So he's the god of Earth. At one time, Ashur says with a shrug. Darius pauses again. There are other gods? You're sitting across from one. But you're a god of this world. Yes. So the god, the one I knew, God, or Jesus, different guy, he created Earth, right? Ashur sighs. No. Then wait, what? Ashur has to laugh, but he's starting to get a bit irritated with this line of conversation. With Earthlings, it's always Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. So who created the Earth? Darius asks. Does that really matter? Ashur asks. You're on my world now. You already said you don't want to go back to your Earth. Why do you care? Darius looks taken aback. Oh, he says. I guess you're right. He looks away. Ashur takes another bite of food, then immediately regrets it as his hunger crowds his mind. So, you created this world? Darius asks. Ashur feels his irritation dig deeper. In a sense, he says. Darius frowns. So, you didn't? Ashur sighs. You're a blacksmith, he says pointedly. Did you create the pieces you sold? Yes, Darius says. Now, did you create the metal that you used to fashion those pieces? Darius thinks. No, he says. Someone had to dig it out of the earth. The earth that God didn't create, apparently. So I don't know who created that metal. But you still created those pieces, right? Ashur prompts. I guess I did, Darius says. I shaped them. There's still something to be said in that, right? Right, Ashur says. I created this world in the same way that you created those pieces. Darius nods. Ashur waits for the pushback, and when he doesn't get any, he's slightly confused. But he doesn't make a show of questioning it, and, looking down and realizing that he's almost finished eating, he quickly shovels the last few bites into his mouth and drinks the broth. So, what are you the god of? Darius asks. Hunger? In a way, Ashur says. He doesn't really feel like getting into the whole discourse on what does and doesn't constitute a god's domain, how they can change, what they even are, and Darius probably wants a simple answer anyway. I am the god of the sun and of flesh, he says. Hunger falls under both. Both, Darius asks, then leans back and glances down at the table as he thinks. Ashur lets Darius ruminate. He glances out the balcony window, where flecks of pink, purple, and blue crowd the cloudy sky as the sun approaches the horizon. He feels almost comfortable sitting across from this human, a feeling he hasn't felt in a very long time, and as he lets himself be lulled by it, he realizes where it's coming from. Darius is reverent. Ashur almost jumps. He fumbles for his words before his mouth can even open. Maybe we should call it a night, he says, quickly getting to his feet. It takes Darius a moment to respond. At least let me help you clean up, he says. Ashur doesn't want to fight right now. Fine, he says. But after this, he'll put his foot down. Darius has to go. Ashur can't let himself succumb to this temptation again. Not so soon. End of chapter 9.